Top 10 lost
in this video,
top 10 lost abilities coming back in WoW Classic, World of Warcraft.
We'll be going over 10 abilities lost to time over the years of WoW's development, which will be making a return to the game once Classic is released, and which ones you should be looking forward to the most.
Okay.
And at number 10, we have a pretty easy one, and that's Eyes of the Beast for the Hunter class. Eyes of the Beast was a Hunter ability that allowed you to take direct control over your Hunter pet, and move around with it, attack with it, as well as use all of its abilities. So if you used a cat pet, for example, which had the stealth ability, hunters could legitimately scout out areas in stealth.
Wait,
before
what?
they got the camouflage ability.
Holy
Eyes of the Beast
shit.
was also helpful for the very niche hunter tank, where sometimes a hunter could use a pet to off-tank certain ads or bosses.
Yep.
But not very well. It was incredibly situational, a subpar way to tank, but with Eyes of the Beast, it allowed hunter pets to be positioned in exactly the place they needed to be, which helped with hunter tanking a lot. But there was no other huge benefits to having Eyes of the Beast, and that's why it was removed in Cataclysm to decrease ability bloat. But it was a very fun ability to use, and I'm happy to see its return.
It was really fun. I liked it a lot,
funny enough, Blizzard said that having to recreate Eyes of the Beast for Classic WoW means they have all the work done in order to reintroduce the ability to live WoW, if they ever decide to do that. As previously, they said they lost the data on how the old Eyes of the Beast work, so they couldn't actually re-add it to the game without a huge amount of effort.
Holy shit, dude.
And at number 9, we have Detect Magic for the Mage class. Now, here's the thing you probably don't know about Vanilla WoW. You can't actually see buffs on a target, only their debuffs. So, a mage would have to use their Detect Magic ability in order to see which buffs the target had. And since nowadays you can see enemy buffs by default, this ability would literally be useless in modern WoW, and can only exist in the game in which stats are hidden. This is because, back in the day, information on mobs and enemy players used to be considered a valuable commodity, as some RPG games use the fact that the stats are hidden as part of balancing
Dungeons and Dragons under Borealis.
But in the modern day, where people can look up all this information online, that kind of gameplay mechanic is rarely used, and is more left to tabletop RPGs. And that's why they removed this feature of the game very early in WoW's life, as it didn't really work very well in an MMO, a mechanic which will be returning to the game with Classic WoW, and hence Detect Magic as well. And at number 8, we have the Rogue Poison sub-profession.
I don't know why they got rid of these.
Did you know Rogues had 2 extra professions? They had one for lockpicking, which they still kind of have today, and they had another for creating their poisons. Nowadays, only certain rogue specs even use poisons, and they're more buffs that you cast on the player than they are things you put on your weapons. But in Vanilla WoW, you had to level up your poison profession to create.
I feel like that was the way that it should be. Like, it's easier, it's easier and simpler if you don't have to do that, but there's a certain part of it where you level up your fucking poisons to put the poisons on your daggers. It just makes sense. It's the same thing that I was saying before about how you shouldn't have tracked mailboxes in the game. Because it doesn't make sense. In no world does that make sense. Like, you can talk about, oh, well, what if there's a dragon and what about that? That's different because it's a fantasy world. Even in a fantasy world, you shouldn't be able to track mailboxes. It doesn't make any fucking sense. That rogues should put poisons on their daggers. That's the way it should work.
Create the best possible poisons, which you can then apply on your weapons. And poisons applied to your weapons had a limited amount of charges to them, only lasted 30 minutes instead of an hour, didn't scale with your gear in any way, and would disappear if you entered a different zone, which meant you had to reapply them after every wipe. So it was possible for your weapons to run out of poisons mid-fight with the old mechanic as well. Luckily, Classic WoW will be running on the 1.12 client, and they fix poisons despawning from your weapons when changing zones in patch 1.11.
Great.
So Classic WoW players will not have to deal with that. Now, in order to level up your poison profession, you would do it just like any other profession, and just make a ton of low-level poisons. And you can get the materials from vendors, lockboxes, pickpocketing, and herbs. So from rogue-related activities and herbalism. The poison sub-profession was removed from rogues in Wrath of the Lich King, so
Sad.
it only really existed for 2 expansions. And at number 7, we have the Shaman Sentry Totem.
This one was useless. This was fucking useless. Like, this one was actually, like, literally nobody gave a fuck about this one. Like, I mean, this is one of the ones, it's like, you talk about, like, items that you just take out of the game, or, like, abilities you just take out of the game because they are useless. Like, this is one that should have been pruned. Let's be honest.
This is another fun ability like Eyes of the Beast that didn't really have too many battle-related benefits.
Yep.
So it was removed over the course of the game just to get rid of ability bloat.
Yep.
Now what Sentry Totem did was allow you to look through the eyes of the totem. So for example, if you set the Sentry Totem outside of a building and then ran inside of that building, you could click on your Sentry Totem in order to look outside of that building. So it was kind of a scouting tool in certain circumstances. The most useful feature this totem had was scouting in battlegrounds, to see when enemy players were going to make a push into your base. And there was also a bug with it that would reset your character's fall distance if used in the air. So it could be used to prevent fall damage. This was not intended
really
though,
smart.
so I doubt Sentry Totem will do that in Classic WoW.
Holy shit.
And also its most useful feature, that had nothing to do with combat or fall damage, was its ability to allow you to take great screenshots of either your character or your guild's first
Yeah, they need to add
kills.
this back into the game. Never mind.
And
Yeah,
at number
this is
6,
really
we have the Warlock's Detect Invisibility.
Okay.
This was a spell Warlocks had that they could use on themselves and friendly players, which would allow them to see invisible targets.
I vaguely
Not
remember
stealth
this.
targets, mind you, only invisible targets, which basically just included invisible ghosts out in the world, like the ones in front of Undercity, and mages who use the invisibility spell. It also had niche uses to allow you to see invisible succubus pets or incredibly rare mobs or bosses that went invisible. That is to say, it didn't have very many uses and was an incredibly situationally useful spell, so it was more of a fun, flavorful ability. You may be noticing a pattern with all of these removed abilities.
They're fun.
Most of them weren't super useful, and that's why a lot of them eventually got removed from the game.
They took out the fun ones.
And with the removal of Detect Invisibility, players kind of lost the ability to see invisible stuff without special items for a long time. Until Blizzard added in some flavorful abilities through glyphs later on, and gave classes the ability to see invisible stuff. Like with the Rogue's Swirly Ball Detection ability, for example. And at number 5, we have the human racial ability, Perception.
Bro, I remember every time I would duel a rogue, and I would use Perception to pop him out of stealth, and then he wouldn't be able to open on me, and I'd hit him with a rend. They would forfeit the duel. They'd be like, fuck you. And they would just forfeit the duel because they knew it was over. They knew it was fucking over. They were dead. Like, it every single time. This happened, this is in Burning Crusade, too. Whenever I do Arena. If I was Human Warriors, like, just deleted rogues. It was the greatest, most amazing thing ever. I loved it. Perception
was a pretty weird racial ability that gave humans an increased chance to see stealth targets on an activatable ability that lasted for around 20 seconds. Now, being able to spot stealth rogues in PvP was a little bit easier back in the days when stealth was a lot worse than it is in live, and this racial ability allowed humans to see them even better. Now, unlike Detect Invisibility, this one specifically only worked on stealth targets, and does not, in fact, allow you to see invisible targets. Stealth and invisibility are 2 separate things in WoW.
They still are now.
Now, what
too.
made Perception different from most other racial activatable abilities?
It was better than all of them.
This one gave you a pretty niche buff.
Yeah.
Whereas other ones would give you damage boosts.
Well, it was not a niche buff. Like in PvP, it was fucking ridiculous. Like you could use it to pull out rogues, and then also there were levels of stealth. You guys might forget this, but back in Classic WoW, there were different stealth levels. So druids had a lower stealth level than rogues did. So if you were gonna pop out a motherfucking druid with Perception, you could see them from 30 yards away, and you can see that stupid ass little cat like. You're not gonna get me, I'm stealth. And then you fucking use Perception on him. You see him, you charge over to his bitch ass, and you kill him. It was so fucking great. I loved it.
Offensive abilities or other combat-related stuff. Perception was kind of an odd one out, and nowhere near as useful as something like Blood Fury or Stone Form, for example. So later on in WoW, Perception was turned into a passive ability, and then removed from the game in Cataclysm.
Thanks, Blizzard.
And at number 4, we have Scare Beast and Turn Undead. These are two fear abilities that only worked on two incredibly specific types of mobs.
You remember, like, all this, like, Turn Undead? You used to be able to use Turn Undead whenever a DK would use Lichborn? How fucking badass is that? It's the same as Scare Beast on Druids. Like, that was awesome. And, like, now that you can't do that, it's like, that's like an extra level of, like, it's like high-level play that also at the same time has the benefit of being, what's like really the word for this? It has the benefit of being, like, I guess, like, enforcing a class fantasy, right? So not only is it a high-level, like, situational play that you can do that makes you look really badass, but it's something that allows you to basically feel like you're playing a paladin. You can play a paladin and you fear undead. It makes sense. It's the best part about it.
Hunters have Scare Beasts, which was a castable CC with no cooldown, which could fear beasts for a pretty hefty amount of time. Yeah. And the most useful application this ability had was in PvP against druids, who, while shapeshifted into some of their forms, were counted as beasts. And paladins, with their turn undead, could fear undead mobs, which were normally unfearable. Of course, later on in WoW, turn undead was turned into turn evil and worked on more targets than just undead.
Yep.
But both of these abilities no longer exist currently in WoW. But, funny enough, there are still incredibly specific CC abilities in the game.
Okay.
Druids have Hibernate, for example, which allows them to put beasts and dragon types to sleep.
Okay.
And priests have Shackle Undead, which allows them to incapacitate undead-only mobs. And these two abilities are incredibly similar to Scare Beast and Turn Undead. So it's a wonder why those two abilities aren't in the game anymore, while Hibernate and Shackle Undead are in the game. But whatever the case, they'll be making a return with Classic WoW.
Sure is.
And at number 3, we have Mana Burn abilities. Specifically, Mana Burn, Viper Sting, and Drain Mana.
Viper Sting was OP as fuck. Like, I remember you could not even go into line of sight of a hunter in Burning Crusade because one Viper Sting would take 20% of your fucking mana. I was so goddamn mad about that drain comps. I actually really liked mana being a genuine resource in the game. Like, nowadays, it seems like unless dampening's at like 30 or 40%, mana doesn't really become a resource in the game at all. It's just something that you use, and it's just kind of irrelevant. But back in Classic WoW, and this changed, I think, in like Mists of Pandaria, maybe even in WoD, but like, mana used to actually be a component. Like, you would have to worry about running somebody's mana out. Dampening, back in the day, for arenas, was running the other healer out of mana. And I feel like that was 1,000 times better than this bullshit contrived system that we have now that's supposed to fix the game. Dampening was 1,000 times worse. Like, having mana be a resource and actual usable thing that you do in Arena makes games so much better. Because the issue with that, right, I'm not going to get into this too much, but the issue with that is that healers are balanced for Arena, but not everything else in the game that's PvP has dampening. So in BGs, you don't have dampening. So healers never run out of mana in BGs. It's stupid. So it's same as World PvP, duels, etc. So there's only one fucking element in the game where healers are actually balanced for, and then everything else, you don't have this system that's supposed to keep healers in line.
In Cataclysm, Blizzard removed 2 of the 3 mana drain abilities, and then the final one with the start of Miss. Because they didn't like the Arena strategy of just trying to survive while you burned your opponent's healer's mana. Mana Burn was the Priest Mana Burn ability, which had a long cast time and would destroy 10% of your opponent's mana per cast.
It's fucking ridiculous.
And then do damage based on the amount of mana you destroyed through the ability. So if you use Mana Burn 10 times, theoretically, that would be enough to completely wipe out someone's mana. In Vanilla WoW, before arenas were added to the game, Mana Burn abilities weren't really a big deal. As they only really applied in Battlegrounds, and in those kinds of settings, mana drains aren't the most important thing in the world for a variety of reasons that just don't apply to arenas. Especially since Mana Burn had such a long cast time, and could be interrupted by just about anything. Drain Mana was kind of in the same vein, except it was a channeled ability and would give the mana it stole to the Warlock, but could also be interrupted or stopped with any kind of CC. Whereas Viper Sting was much different than the other two, as it was instant cast. You could just throw it up on a healer, and that would drain their mana over time. And if the healer didn't have the ability to dispel poisons, they couldn't get rid of it on themselves. And since Viper Sting was the easiest one to apply, it drained the least amount of mana out of all of them. And like I said a little earlier on in the video, mana drain abilities are only really a problem in arenas, which vanilla WoW won't have.
Thank
so
God.
They shouldn't be as much of a nuisance as they were in the Burning Crusade or Wrath of the Lich King when they were in full force. And at number 2, we have the Warlock ability, Ritual of Doom. This is a very...
This was the most badass fucking spell, dude. Like, this is, again, class fantasy. This is like, you play the game, and whenever you cast Ritual of Doom, you're playing a Warlock. You know you're playing a Warlock. Those are the kinds of things that made the game special. I know nowadays Blizzard is afraid to make things special and exciting, but back in the day, this is what it fucking was right here.
Flavorful RP ability that Warlocks had, where they performed a ritual with 4 other party members in order to summon a Doom Guard. And when the Doom Guard is summoned, one of the 5 people who channeled the spell would be sacrificed in order to summon that Doom Guard. Which could include the Warlock himself. And then once the Doom Guard was summoned, it was a neutral demon who would go around and start attacking people. So if you wanted it as a pet, you had to tame it with Enslaved Demon, which only allowed you to use the Doom Guard for 5 minutes, unless it broke the seal early. And while the Ritual of Doom was a very neat ability in theory, in practice and usefulness, it was just a tad bit too inconvenient to use in any practical manner. But you definitely could summon the Doom Guard and use it as a pet in raids.
But it was cool.
But it was also much easier to just use a regular Warlock pet instead, especially since Ritual of Doom also had a 1-hour cooldown. Ritual of Doom was removed from the game later on in WoW, and currently it is incredibly difficult to summon a Doom Guard, as they only randomly spawn if a random talent that only one spec of Warlocks can take is able to get the killing blow on a target.
Sad.
So it doesn't really exist in the game anymore, and especially not in the way it did in vanilla WoW, where you had to perform the ritual with 4 other people. And I think the Warlock Ritual of Doom is the perfect example of a vanilla WoW-like ability, where Blizzard was really experimenting with what they could do with the game, and trying to figure out what was cool and what was useful, and sometimes those two things didn't really mix.
Imagine trying to raid with 4 Demo Locks that all need to summon this dude every pull. Can you imagine? Imagine your guildmaster being a Warlock, and like every hour on the hour, you have to zone out, have some random dude die, and then res them back up, and then he tries to enslave the demon, you zone in, the demon goes crazy again, somebody accidentally debuffs the demon, now the fucking guildmaster's mad. Like, these types of things are just fucking funny, dude. They're just fucking funny. And that's what the game was about, man. Just funny, dumbass shit.
Sometimes they were too useful and had to be removed because of that. Like the number 1 spot on this list.
Okay.
And at number 1, we have the Paladin ability, Divine Intervention. On a 1-hour cooldown, the Paladin could kill themselves in order to place an unbreakable bubble on a party member, who would drop them out of combat and make them not be able to do anything until they clicked off the bubble. And it was supposed to fulfill the Paladin fantasy of sacrificing themselves in order to save someone, as it did this very well, and was mostly used in raids as a wipe recovery tool. Where the Paladin can sacrifice themselves in order to save a healer who could start rezzing people, while at the same time saving them a repair bill. The problem with this ability, though, is it was a little too good at saving people, and the bubble placed on people was a little too good at making them immune to everything and drop out of combat. Because you see, this ability would completely break some encounters, and people were using it in order to bug out boss fights to kill them easier.
So what?
Or to completely ignore tough phases of certain fights. It got to the point where Blizzard said they were designing fights with divine intervention in mind. As in, they constantly had to think, will this new mechanic be broken by a divine intervention? And if an ability is so powerful that Blizzard has to design fights around it, you know there's a problem with it. And that's why they just kind of removed it with the Cataclysm.
They could have
kind of the same reason why they removed the AoE silence from Blood Elves Arcade Torrent ratio.
Sad.
Blizzard doesn't like to design fights around one specific ability. But with...
Come on, man. They don't like to design fights around one specific ability. Give me a fucking break. Like, you just fixed the way that Divine Intervention interacts with different abilities. They designed it around, Bloodlust. I mean, like, here, Trank Shot. What about Warlock Gates on Gahoon? There's another example. Jesus Christ, man. Yeah, Shroud and Mythic Plus. Yeah, well, you know what? It's really good now that that Blizzard doesn't want to have everything designed around one class, because that would make things completely unfair, and it would be completely disgusting and sad for everybody. So let's hope that doesn't happen. I'd hate to see that happen, guys. Where is it? Fuck, where is it? There it is. Yeah, that would just be absolutely terrible if things were just designed around one class. Don't you guys think? I mean, that would just be the worst.
Classic WoW, all of the boss fights have already been designed with Divine Intervention in mind.
Yep.
And there's a good probability that they would have fixed the few fights that Divine Intervention broke.
Yep.
Like Razorgore and Blackwing Lair.
Yep.
And it's kind of one of those abilities that can only exist in Classic WoW, as there's no way it'll come back to live version of the game in its Classic WoW
Truly
form.
sad.
Alright, and that's the end of the video. Do you know of any other abilities coming back for Classic that should have made this list? Do you have any ideas for videos just like this one?
Mocking Blow.
If so, I'd love to hear about them down in the comments.
I also love, like, one of my favorite abilities is Retaliation. Like, Wrath of the Lich King Retaliation was one of the best fucking abilities Warriors ever got. Because you could use that, I think you could use that shit in Arena. I don't remember exactly very well. But yeah, you used to be able to use that back in the day. Let me look. Yeah, we'll watch the Bellier video, okay? Moral of the story. Anything fun was removed in Cataclysm. That is actually true. What the fuck? That's very, very true. Okay, I'm gonna hearth over. I'm gonna farm the Rust Feather mount, the Arachnid Harvester mount while we're watching the Bellier video. Okay, and what are the rest of these comments? M4 Bald Mount Collector visits this video for stream content. Asmongold, Baldmongold, Stone Cold Gold. At least someone took his name. Hi, chat. You forgot one important ability. Community. Yeah, that's a very big important ability. Viper Sting was my love. Yeah, it certainly fucking was. Sentry Totem was a selfie cam before selfie cam was the thing. I didn't even know you could do that, honestly. Feed Pet. Wait, I thought they got rid of Feed Pet. Like, I remember I used Feed Pet back in my Iron Man challenge. Like, what do you guys mean? Like, yeah, what the fuck? Let me see. Where's the rest of these? New video to watch while eating my dinner. Really good and informational video. Mana Burn is widely used in vanilla PvP. Yeah, it's fucking awesome. Like, Mana Burn was an amazing ability. I don't know why they don't have more things like Mana Burn. It's awesome. Okay, just a second. Let me go ahead and do this. That's the bottom line. Yeah, you're goddamn right. Alt timeline, shit. Okay, can somebody invite me up to a group that has Arachnid Harvester up on it? Kel'Thuzad, Asmongold. Alright, let's see. It doesn't affect happiness, so it doesn't matter. Yeah, I guess not, but it does heal them for a pretty good margin.